Right about now, my husband is probably thinking I am sitting at home, crying and waiting for him to return. I stared at the minute that had just been posted on his secret social media account with completely emotionless eyes. At the end of the caption on his secondary account was a mocking LOL. Today is our first wedding anniversary. On the dining room table in front of me sits an untouched, completely cold, lavish dinner. My husband is likely tangled in the sheets of a luxury hotel bed with his ex-girlfriend right now. But they don't know the truth yet. They don't know that in a few hours, when my husband returns home in high spirits, every single trace of my existence will have vanished from this apartment. And they certainly do not know that a single piece of paper left on this table will send him crashing to the absolute rock bottom of despair. The hands of the wall clock in the living room just past midnight. The sterile, mechanical ticking was the only sound echoing in the dead silence of the room. I stood up slowly and looked down at the meal I had arranged on the table. My husband's favorite prime ribeye steak had lost the beautiful, mouth-watering gloss it had when it was fresh off the pan. The white fat had completely congealed. The slow-cooked short rib ragu I had spent hours simmering since this morning was stone cold, a thin film forming over its surface. Only the anniversary flower bouquet sitting in the corner of the room bloomed with an unnatural vibrancy in the bizarre, heavy atmosphere of the apartment. Earlier this evening, while I was putting the finishing touches on dinner in the kitchen, a short text message arrived from my husband. So sorry. A massive crisis just hit the office, and I have to stay overnight. I know it's our anniversary, and I feel terrible. Go to sleep without me. If this had been the early days of our marriage, I would have believed those words without a shadow of a doubt. I would have stayed up late waiting for him, worried sick about his health. I would have texted back, asking if he was going to catch a cold or if he was pushing himself too hard, and I would have prepared a packed lunch for him for the next morning. But the woman I am today is no longer fooled by his cheap lies. Because while he claims to be handling a corporate crisis, I know exactly where he is and what he is doing. The smartphone in my hand displayed the secret Instagram account my husband used. A few months ago, it was a Pandora's box I accidentally stumbled upon when he left his iPad logged in and unattended on the living room sofa. Vividly documented on that screen, complete with photos, was the indisputable record of him sleeping with his ex-girlfriend, Jessica, despite having me as his wife. Today's post was particularly cruel. Updated just after 8 p.m., the photo showed two champagne glasses clinking together at a high-end restaurant with a view of the Chicago skyline. The caption accompanying the photo read, "Lied about having to work on our anniversary. Drinking champagne with Jessica beats my wife's home cooking any day. Bet she's at home crying right now. LOL." The moment I saw that post, something inside my heart completely and audibly shattered. Strangely enough, not a single tear fell. My hands didn't shake with anger, nor did my chest tear apart with sorrow. Instead, a quiet, absolute resolve spread through me, like sinking into freezing, pitch-black water. The first year of our marriage hadn't been entirely bad. Every morning I would see him off at the door, and every night we would eat dinner together. On weekends, we would walk hand in hand to the local Whole Foods, talking about our modest future. I genuinely believed those ordinary, peaceful days would last forever. I thought my husband was the ideal partner, always gentle and considerate of me. But that gentleness was nothing more than camouflage to hide his own guilt. 6 months ago, the gears of our marriage began to slip the day Jessica, his ex-girlfriend, was hired at his company as a mid-level manager. My husband started coming home later and later. He began leaving the house on weekends, claiming he had sudden work emergencies, the smell of cheap women's perfume on his clothes, unfamiliar restaurant receipts in his shirt pockets. I played dumb, desperately struggling in my own mind to trust him time and time again. I harbored a faint hope that he would wake up and return to me. Today, on our wedding anniversary, that fragile hope was brutally smashed to pieces. I let out a quiet breath and tossed the cold ribeye into the trash bag. Watching the carefully prepared meal turn into pathetic garbage made me feel absolutely nothing. Any lingering love or attachment I had for my husband had been completely erased over the last few hours. I no longer needed to play the role of the pitiful wife waiting and crying at home. I walked into the master bedroom and pulled a cardboard box from the back of the closet, which I had prepared in advance. The truth is, for the past few weeks, I had been gradually packing up my belongings, making sure my husband wouldn't notice. My books, winter clothes, and important documents had already been shipped to my childhood home. All that remained were the bare minimum essentials I could carry out immediately. With robotic precision, I took my remaining underwear and clothes from the dresser and packed them into my suitcase. There was no hesitation whatsoever in my movements. Even at this very moment, while my husband was mocking me and sleeping with another woman, I was steadily finalizing the preparations to take my life back. The clock struck 3 a.m. It was still pitch black outside, and the city was in a deep sleep. My packing was nearly done. Looking around the room, my eyes stopped on my favorite throw pillows, the curtains we had picked out together, and the matching coffee mugs we bought on a weekend trip. Those items, which I once held dear, now looked like meaningless props on a hollow stage. I intended to erase absolutely everything that belonged to me from this apartment. Instead, I would leave just one thing in the center of the completely emptied living room table. It was something with enough destructive power to instantly obliterate the flimsy confidence and vanity my husband had built up over his entire life. He still knows nothing. He has no idea how much evidence I hold or how much resolve I carried into this night. In a few hours, when he rolls out of that hotel bed and returns to this apartment with a satisfied smirk on his face, he will realize that his life is already over. Stopping my packing for a moment, I opened his secret account one last time. There was a new post from an hour ago. I walked over to the dining table, took off my wedding ring from my left hand, and placed it quietly on top of a brown envelope. The small clinking sound echoed hollowly in the late-night room. On the finger where the ring had been, a distinct white tan line remained, a mark of the 1 year I had worn it. Staring at that small mark, the memory of a phone call from my mother-in-law a few days ago came rushing vividly back to my mind. "Hello, Sarah? I'm calling because I'm worried Mark is coming home so late recently." Over the phone, my mother-in-law's voice had the gentle ring of a mother concerned about her son. However, I knew all too well the cold thorns hidden behind her words, always ready to blame me. "Yes, he seems to be very busy with work lately, so he's been working late," I answered safely. My mother-in-law let out an exaggerated sigh. "It's fine that he's busy with work, but when a man doesn't want to come home, it's usually the wife's fault." "Sarah, are you really creating a relaxing home environment for Mark? You're a stay-at-home wife. You need to execute these things perfectly." As always, she pinned all the responsibility on me. The fact that I woke up early to make his lunch and stayed up late reheating his dinner meant nothing to her. It was simply what I was expected to do. But her words that day took a slightly different turn. Mark told me, "You know." He said a woman at his office has been giving him great career advice. Jessica, I think her name was. He said she's an old college friend and incredibly competent. The moment Jessica's name was mentioned, I thought my heart was going to freeze. My mother-in-law knew perfectly well that Jessica was Mark's ex-girlfriend. Before we got married, it was my mother-in-law who detested Jessica's flashy appearance and strong, demanding personality. She had declared that a woman like that was unfit for her precious son, and she was the one who pushed the quiet, obedient Sarah onto Mark. Jessica is out there working hard and is highly relied upon at her company. Unlike you, she faces the real world, so I'm sure it's easier for Mark to talk to her about his work struggles. "You should at least read the Wall Street Journal so you can offer him one piece of useful conversation," she sneered. I was at a complete loss for words. The same woman who had forced me into the role of a homemaker, claiming a woman's place was to support her husband, was now using a working woman like Jessica to look down on me. To my mother-in-law, my feelings and efforts didn't matter at all. The only thing that mattered was that her son was successful and looked good to the rest of the world, and she probably suspected that Mark and Jessica were more than just co-workers. Yet, she likely believed that a man having an affair was a sign of his success, and it was the fault of a boring wife. I understand. "I will try harder," I replied, killing my emotions, and hung up the phone. The single tear that fell onto the smartphone screen I was clutching was not out of sadness, but out of a bottomless disappointment in this family. Neither my husband nor my mother-in-law saw me as a human being. To them, I was just a convenient backstage crew member meant to maintain the good image of the family, a useful, unpaid maid. That fact had been thrust upon me in the most brutal way just last month. I had woken up with chills and a severe headache, and by the afternoon my fever had spiked to 102 degrees. Unable to even stand, I lay on the sofa waiting for Mark to come home. When he finally walked in past 10 p.m., he looked at me bundled in blankets in the dark living room and, instead of worrying, furrowed his brows. "What's going on? Where is dinner?" "I'm so sorry. I have a 102-degree fever and I can't get up." I apologized with a hoarse voice. Mark didn't sigh heavily, but he made absolutely no effort to hide his blatant annoyance. "Are you serious? I have a massive presentation first thing tomorrow morning. I really can't afford to catch whatever you have." Saying that, he walked straight into his room without even coming near me. A few minutes later, he He returned to the living room carrying a small duffel bag and threw his words at me in a freezing tone. I'm going to play it safe and grab a room at a nearby hotel tonight. You can lock the door yourself, right? Get well soon. Before I could even utter a word, the heavy sound of the front door slamming shut echoed through the apartment. In my feverish haze, I watched his retreating back with absolute despair. Right before he walked out, the screen of the smartphone in his hand had lit up. I had clearly seen a short text message pop up from a contact named Jessica. Come over tonight. A husband who abandons his sick, feverish wife alone in their apartment to go to his mistress's house. This was the true face of the man I had sacrificed everything for over the past year. Delirious from the fever, I cried through the night. I realized that all my efforts up to that point had been completely meaningless. The next morning, with my fever broken, I stared at my pale face in the bathroom mirror and made a firm decision. There was no place for me in this house. And I absolutely refused to waste my life on a man like this. Now, sitting in the freezing room, I stared at the wedding ring placed on the table. This ring was nothing more than a shackle Mark used to tie me down. Now that I had taken it off, my heart felt incredibly light and clear. Both Mark and his mother thought I was just a weak woman who would cry and cling to him. They assumed that as a stay-at-home wife with no financial power, I couldn't survive if threatened with divorce. That is exactly why they underestimated me, looked down on me, and treated me like a convenient tool. But they were making one massive miscalculation. I hadn't just been enduring this in silence. Over the past 6 months, while they were laughing at me behind my back, I had been steadily making preparations to protect myself. I opened the built-in drawer in the living room and pulled out a small lockbox hidden all the way in the back. Inside was a folder containing official bank statements in my name, something Mark had absolutely no idea existed. This account was my ultimate trump card, the very thing that would shatter his arrogance from the ground up. I opened it and quietly stared at the final balance printed inside, alongside the name of a corporation, Miller Property Management. My family had never appeared wealthy on the surface. However, my father, who passed away a few years ago, ran a rock-solid real estate business in our home state, and he left the entire company, its rights, and its assets to me, his only child. Keep this wealth a secret from the man you marry for a while. You need to carefully observe if he is a man who loves Sarah for who she is, not for her money or pedigree. Following the words my father left me on his deathbed, I had never told Mark or his mother that my family was wealthy. Because of that, my mother-in-law treated me like a miserable, penniless housewife, and Mark never hid his entitled attitude, always acting like the grand provider. Once, when I missed a sale at the grocery store and bought slightly more expensive organic vegetables, Mark glared at me with deep displeasure and scolded me coldly. Sarah, you don't know the struggle of earning a paycheck out in the real world, so you have no problem wasting money like this. As a stay-at-home wife, your job is to save every single penny and protect the money I earn. At the time, I didn't argue back. I just quietly lowered my head. But the woman I am today knows that the man who spat those words at me was secretly spending 10 times that amount on another woman. If I showed them this bank account, they would flip their attitudes instantly and come crawling to me. But I would never, ever use this money for them. The event that truly made me realize the cruel reality and solidify my resolve to leave happened 3 months ago. It was a rainy afternoon. Mark had rushed out of the house that morning, claiming he had an important board meeting. However, he had uncharacteristically forgotten his personal iPad, the one he guarded so heavily he even took it into the bathroom, wedged between the sofa cushions. Normally, I would never snoop through someone else's belongings, but at that moment, I simply couldn't look away from a notification that popped up brightly on the screen. Last night was amazing. Your wife doesn't suspect a thing, right? The sender was Jessica. The moment I saw that short text, my heart started pounding like a frantic alarm, and I still remember how my fingertips began to tremble. Last night, Mark had come home at 2 a.m., claiming a client dinner ran late. He reeked of alcohol, but I sympathized with his hard work, brewed him hot tea, and rubbed his back. How did he receive my kindness in that moment? Was he laughing inside at the foolish woman being so easily deceived? As the sound of the rain battered the window pane, I unconsciously touched the tablet with shaking hands. It was passcode locked. After hesitating for a moment, I typed in a combination of Mark's birthday and the birthday of his childhood dog. Betraying my expectation that he wouldn't use such a simple code, the screen unlocked instantly. The hours that followed were a suffocating nightmare. The messaging app was overflowing with complaints about me and sweet words for Jessica. Sarah's food is so bland. Your cooking is the absolute best, Jess. Even my mom says she wishes you were her daughter-in-law instead of Sarah. That woman is just a glorified maid. Their exchanges were too deep and malicious to be brushed off as just an affair. It was as if they were consuming my existence for their own entertainment, taking sheer delight in trampling all over me. What gouged my heart even further was a selfie Jessica had sent. In the photo, she was wearing a low-cut dress, and around her neck hung a very familiar, expensive diamond necklace. It was the exact necklace Mark had consulted me about 6 months prior, saying, "I'm thinking of buying this for my mom's 60th birthday. What do you think?" I had smiled brightly and encouraged him, saying, "Your mom will definitely love it." The moment I realized that was just camouflage to pick out a present for his mistress, I felt the contents of my stomach rising to my throat. I ran to the bathroom, leaned against the cold porcelain sink, and as I took harsh, ragged breaths, I finally understood the desperate, hopeless situation I was in. My sanity was pushed to its absolute limit by the fact that such an ugly, monstrous, true face was hiding beneath the mask of the husband I trusted. But the real hell was just beginning. Walking back to the living room on unsteady legs, I kept scrolling up through their chat history until an unfamiliar app icon caught my eye. It was a cloud storage and file-sharing app. A red notification badge sat on the top right corner of the icon. As if controlled by an unseen force, I opened it. Inside was a single shared folder. The folder was titled Our Future Plans, a name that sent shivers of absolute disgust down my spine. The moment I saw the files inside, I felt the blood completely drain from my body. These weren't just vacation photos or words of love. My hands holding the iPad shook, and water droplets fell onto the screen. I realized then for the first time that I was staring at the screen while crying. But the moment I opened a specific spreadsheet saved in that folder, my tears dried up instantly, replaced by a dark, heavy rage that began boiling up quietly from the absolute bottom of my chest. It was the full scope of a sickening plot that I could never, ever forgive. Displayed on the screen was a spreadsheet coldly titled Timeline to Divorce. The moment I opened it with a shaking finger, my eyes were met with a sterile, ruthless list of bullet points that hardly seemed written by a human being. It was a step-by-step, month-by-month plan to mentally corner me, break me down, and ultimately throw me out on the street without a single penny. Month 1. Cut household allowance. Induce financial anxiety in Sarah to strip her confidence. Month 3. Start yelling over minor things. Normalize emotional abuse so Sarah begins to blame herself. Month 5. Feed bad stories about Sarah to mom. Have mom escalate her harassment. Create an environment where Sarah wants to run away. It read like a sterile, cold-blooded strategy guide for a video game. The document's author history clearly bore Jessica's name. I suddenly remembered Mark bragging before we got married that Jessica had a degree in pre-law and was incredibly smart regarding legal matters. She was using that knowledge to systematically destroy my life. Scrolling further down, an even more horrifying plan was laid out, making me gasp for air. Month 8. Mom's hip replacement surgery. Discharge her to the apartment and force 100% of the unpaid caregiving onto Sarah. Month 10. Right when Sarah reaches her breaking point from caregiving exhaustion, fabricate evidence that she is having an affair and demand a divorce. Month 12. Frame Sarah as the guilty party. Kick her out with $0 in alimony. Mark and Jessica get married. As I read on, an intense anger I had never experienced before surged through me, feeling like my blood was actually boiling. Mark and Jessica weren't just planning to toss me out like garbage. They intended to exploit me as a convenient, unpaid slave to handle his mother's burdensome medical care before discarding me. And my mother-in-law, whether she knew of this specific plan or not, had been escalating her cold treatment of me, fully believing Mark's lies. Finding this file suddenly made all of Mark's bizarre behavior recently make perfect sense. Like the night 2 weeks ago when he spoke to me in an unnaturally sweet voice. "Sarah, thank you so much for always working so hard around the house. Hey, I need you to sign this document for my company's family health insurance benefits. Can you just sign and date right here?" Saying that, he handed me a thick stack of documents covered in dense legal text. Normally, I might have trusted him and signed without a second thought. However, as the successor to my late father's company, my corporate attorney had strictly warned me never to carelessly sign documents involving legal jargon. "I'm sorry, do you mind if I read through it a bit first?" The moment I said that, the smile vanished from Mark's face, and I heard him let out a loud, frustrated groan. "Are you saying you don't trust me? Don't act like a smartass when you're just a housewife. Forget it. I need it by tomorrow, so you better sign it." He snatched the papers back in a rage and locked himself in the bedroom. Looking back, it was blindingly obvious that those documents were some sort of binding contract, meant to force disadvantageous terms on me. A cold sweat ran down my spine thinking about what would have happened if I had signed it blindly. I even found audio files of their conversations on the tablet. Hesitantly pressing play, Mark and Jessica's laughter echoed through the quiet living room. "Mark, it is so hilarious that your wife still actually believes you love her. She's just a naive idiot who doesn't know how the world works. If I act just a little bit nice, she wags her tail like a happy dog. She's the perfect pawn, a free maid, and a free nurse. It's awesome. Let's kick her out soon and make that apartment our new place. We can buy all new furniture, too." Listening to the vulgar, shallow conversation of two people who actually believed they were geniuses, the tears completely vanished from my eyes. In their place, a resolve as cold as ice solidified in my chest. I had no time to be sad. I am not some weak woman who cries herself to sleep and gets thrown away exactly as they planned. I pulled out my own smartphone and began taking photos of every single thing. The schedule, the audio files, the message history. Just to be safe, I forwarded all the data to my own secure cloud server, preserving them as indestructible evidence. In the living room, with the sound of rain echoing quietly, I worked methodically, illuminated only by the pale light of the screen. At that moment, I think I became like a machine devoid of all emotion. After saving every piece of data, I returned the iPad to its exact previous state and slipped it quietly back into the gap between the sofa cushions. The next morning, Mark woke up acting completely normal, visibly relieved that his tablet was safe. When he flashed me a refreshing smile and said, "I'm off to work hard for us again today," I smiled quietly in my heart. You think you are deceiving me, but the one truly dancing on a string is you. From that day on, my preparations for a counterattack began. I contacted Mr. Harrison, a brilliant, sharp-minded lawyer who had worked for my family since my father's time, and began holding secret consultations with him. And then came today, our first wedding anniversary. The final entry on that spreadsheet read, "First anniversary. Lie about working late and celebrate with Jessica at a luxury hotel. Let Sarah eat a miserable cold dinner by herself. This will be the ritual for our new beginning." Right now, they are probably drunk on the sweet wine of victory, believing this plan is progressing flawlessly. But there is one fact they do not know. I have already used resources beyond their wildest imaginations to completely cut off every single one of their escape routes. Staring at the bank balance on the table, I stood up quietly and walked toward the living room door. The packing was done. All that was left were the finishing touches. I took a specific piece of paper out of my bag, one drafted with my lawyer, and placed it right in the center of the table. Looking at the ruthless, cold words written on that paper, I imagined the look on Mark's face tomorrow morning. Just visualizing it made a quiet laugh bubble up from deep within my chest, impossible to suppress. The clock was about to strike 4 a.m. Looking down at the few sheets of paper placed on the silent living room table documents I had drafted with Mr. Harrison that were ruthless to the point of perfection, I thought back over the lonely battle of these past few months. It was the day after I discovered that horrifying timeline to divorce on the iPad. I lied to my husband, saying I was going to a big grocery sale, took the train downtown, and headed straight to Mr. Harrison's law firm. Mr. Harrison is in his mid-60s, with graying hair and a generally mild expression, but when it comes to work, he possesses a razor-sharp mind that allows absolutely zero compromises. Sitting on the plush leather sofa in his office, I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and showed him everything. "Mr. Harrison, what should I do? I feel so pathetic for trusting him," I said, looking down at my lap. I watched as the gentle look vanished from Mr. Harrison's face, replaced by a deep furrow between his brows. "Sarah, you did an incredible job enduring this alone and bringing this to me. It must have been agonizing, but you have absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. The ones who should be ashamed are your husband and his mistress, who took advantage of your kindness to plot something this despicable. This is not just infidelity, it is highly malicious psychological abuse." At his powerful words, the tension I had been holding on to snapped, and I broke down sobbing. Having someone validate my pain made me feel like I could finally breathe again. After I cried it out and calmed down, Mr. Harrison handed me a glass of cold water and quietly began outlining our strategy. Even if the other party is a woman who knows a bit about the law, we have nothing to fear. The data they left behind is perfect evidence proving not only their affair but their malicious intent. However, To completely prevent them from talking their way out of this, we will use a private investigator I trust. Then, his eyes flashing sharply behind his glasses, he brought up another crucial fact. Sarah, your husband does not know who actually owns the condo you live in, correct? Yes. I've never told him that I took over my father's company, or that the apartment is owned by my firm. He firmly believes we are paying rent through a property management company. It was true. The spacious, beautiful luxury condo we lived in was actually one of the properties owned by my company, Miller Property Management. When we were newlyweds, Mark had proudly brought home a lease agreement, saying, "I found a great place near the station. With my salary, we can just barely afford the rent, so let's take it." I had nodded, acting impressed while hiding my shock. I couldn't bring myself to tell him it was my own building, so I swore the management company to absolute secrecy, ordering them to hide my identity as the landlord from my husband. "Then this will be quick," Mr. Harrison said. "We will terminate the lease agreement under your authority as the owner. They intended to kick you out and make it their new home, but the one being thrown out on the street will be him." For the next month, while waiting for the private investigator's reports, I continued to play the role of the oblivious, obedient wife. Even though my heart was swirling with contempt and rage, whenever Mark came home, I greeted him with a smile and set a hot, home-cooked meal on the table. Mark continued to boss me around, treating me like a highly convenient, low-maintenance servant. The night I received the final report from the investigator, Mark came home in a foul mood and threw his suit jacket right at me. "Hey, Sarah, there are weird wrinkles on this jacket. It's because you threw it carelessly into the closet, isn't it? Seriously. You're a housewife and you can't even manage clothes properly?" he spat. I stared quietly at his face. Just a few hours prior, I had been sitting in the investigator's office, looking at photos of him walking into a hotel with Jessica wearing that exact jacket. I knew perfectly well the wrinkles weren't from how I hung it up, but because it had been tossed haphazardly onto the floor next to a hotel bed. "I'm so sorry. I'll take it to the dry cleaners tomorrow," I said, bowing my head with exaggerated apology. Mark scoffed. "Jessica would never make a stupid mistake like this. She is flawless at work and so attentive. You should really learn a thing or two from her." Never before had the man standing in front of me looked like such a foolish, comical creature, bringing up his mistress's name himself, comparing her to his wife, and bathing in a false sense of superiority. He had no idea that every single word he spoke was becoming the very evidence that would hang him. Desperately suppressing a cold laugh, I simply replied, "You're right, I should learn from her." From that day on, any tiny, lingering shred of affection I had for him completely vanished. All that was left was cold, calculating math to ensure I pushed them to the absolute bottom of society. And now, I placed a signed divorce petition on the table next to an official notice to vacate from my company. Written in Mr. Harrison's uncompromising legal terms were demands for immediate eviction due to breach of contract, along with a warning of financial damages for trespassing. Next to that, I fanned out copies of the graphic photos the private investigator had taken of their hotel rendezvous. Anyone with half a brain looking at this would instantly understand they were completely surrounded with nowhere to run. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase and headed for the front door. I turned around one last time and surveyed the room I had lived in for a year. I didn't have a single millimeter of attachment left for this place. I opened the door quietly and stepped out into the freezing pre-dawn air. The click of the lock turning felt like the starting pistol for my new life. The moment I slid into the back of the pre-arranged Uber waiting outside the building, my smartphone buzzed briefly. It was a text from the investigator staking out the hotel. "Target has just left the hotel. He should be heading to your location shortly." Attached was a photo of my husband, entirely oblivious, with a massive, arrogant smile on his face. He had only a few dozen minutes left before he realized his life was over. Watching the city scenery blur by out the window, I let out a slow, deep breath. The dawning Chicago skyline slipped past the window quietly. Riding in the car through the early morning streets, which were still mostly empty of people, I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. The suffocating tension from packing in the apartment was gone. Leaning back into the seat, I felt an incredible sense of liberation, as if a massive lead weight had finally been lifted off my shoulders. My husband, Mark, his mistress, Jessica, and my mother-in-law, Barbara, who never stopped looking down on me as a glorified maid. Even imagining them toasting their victory right now didn't cause a single ripple in my heart. It was dead calm. I had acquired this ruthless, icy composure exactly 2 weeks ago. That afternoon, Sitting in the heavy mahogany chairs of Mr. Harrison's law firm, I was shown the bottomless depths of human malice. 2 weeks ago on that day, a cold rain was falling. It was a few days after I had handed over the timeline to divorce data and the evidence of the affair. Sarah, you did incredibly well to stay calm and bring this data to me. However, the situation is far more severe and malicious than we initially imagined. Mr. Harrison, usually mild-mannered, narrowed his eyes behind his glasses and spoke in a grim tone. Placed on the desk was a thick investigative report, and next to it, a copy of a very familiar document. It was the unnatural paperwork Mark had tried to force me to sign and notarize, claiming it was for his company's family health insurance. Mr. Harrison, that's the paperwork. Yes, Sarah. This is the document your husband tried to force you to sign. This has absolutely nothing to do with HR or insurance. Mr. Harrison pointed to a section of the text, his voice steady but hard. This is a co-signer agreement to take on $300,000 in debt. The moment I heard those words, I doubted my own ears. $300,000. Why would Mark, an average corporate manager, try to take out such an absurd amount of money? As I sat there speechless, Mr. Harrison turned to the next page. There are 2 reasons your husband needed this massive sum. The first is a mountain of debt accumulated by your mother-in-law, Barbara. My mother-in-law has debt? But she is so obsessed with penny pinching and constantly preaches to me about money, I asked, completely in disbelief. Barbara was the woman who constantly lectured me that a housewife's job was to cut costs down to the last cent and not waste Mark's hard-earned salary. But the truth revealed by Mr. Harrison was the exact opposite and comically foolish. Barbara has been secretly buying high-end designer bags, jewelry, and luxury clothes to show off to the women in her neighborhood and at her country club, hiding it all from her husband and relatives. As a result, she has racked up approximately $50,000 in debt across multiple credit cards and payday loans. $50,000? Yes. And when she hit a wall with the repayments, she ran crying to her eldest son Mark, begging him to fix her mess. I felt a chill run down my spine. My mother-in-law was trying to make her son wipe her behind for her own reckless spending, all while sitting on her high horse and lecturing me about being a good, frugal wife. But Mark himself didn't have the savings to bail her out, because his own bank accounts were already bled dry by his luxury hotel stays and expensive gifts for his mistress, Jessica. Mr. Harrison's words were clinical, but they gouged at my heart. That is when Jessica proposed a plan to your husband. That plan is this $300,000 loan. Jessica planned this? Yes. We also ran a background check on Jessica. She plays the part of a glamorous career woman, but she has a history of financial trouble and nearly filed for bankruptcy in the past. She is also hiding massive debts from gambling and high-end partying. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the office sounded eerie in the silence. In other words, Jessica does not love Mark. She is manipulating him with sweet words to get him to pay off her debts, and plans to use the remaining cash as a down payment on a new condo for themselves. Mark is nothing more than a pathetic clown being completely used by her. Then why would they try to make me the co-signer? I started to ask, and then it hit me. You figured it out, Sarah. Your husband looks down on you as a penniless housewife, but any financial institution running a deep background check would quickly find out that you inherited a highly profitable real estate company from your late father. Mr. Harrison looked down at his cooling tea. They don't know the exact details of your company, but they intended to use you, the convenient wife, as the ultimate safety net for all their debts. They plan to mentally corner you, strip away your ability to make rational decisions, and force you to sign this. The moment the loan cleared, they would fabricate an affair to kick you out with nothing. That was the true objective of the spreadsheet you found on that iPad. This was not a simple affair. It was an incredibly cruel, calculated act intended to completely destroy my life from the roots and use me as a sacrifice for their greed. When I understood the whole truth, the emotion of sadness vanished completely. What rose up in its place was not a burning, fiery rage. It was an ice-cold, razor-sharp, absolute resolve that I would never, ever forgive them. For the past year, I had made Mark's lunch every single day, ironed his suits, endured Barbara's sarcastic remarks, and devoted myself to believing in our family bond. They didn't just trample on my modest love and effort. They tried to use me as a human shield for their debts. Sarah. At Mr. Harrison's quiet voice, my head snapped up. Since their malice runs this deep and is this ugly, we have absolutely no need to show them any mercy. We will thoroughly, and entirely legally, block every single one of their escape routes. We will force them to walk directly into the very trap they set for you, and let it snap shut on them. I nodded deeply at his words. The old Sarah, who always tried to be the good wife, was dead. From here on out, it was a war to protect my own life and dignity. Miss Harrison, what do we need to do to ensure they can never recover from this? At my question, Mr. Harrison pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. First, we must strike at the exact moment your husband feels the safest, the moment he is under the delusion that he has completely won. To do that, I need you to play the obedient wife for just a little bit longer. Remembering Mr. Harrison's words from that day, I slowly opened my eyes in the backseat of the Uber. Exactly as instructed, I played the perfect, clueless, foolish wife right up until yesterday, our anniversary. Specifically, the dinner I cooked last night right before he went out was my last supper for him. Remembering Mark's comical arrogance and fake smiles from last night still brought a cold laugh to my throat. He had eaten that food so triumphantly, without a single doubt about his impending doom. I looked back on the events of last night with the detached calmness of someone watching a very old movie. Leaning my head slightly against the cool glass of the car window, I recalled last night the eve of what was supposed to be our first wedding anniversary. To perfectly play the obedient wife Mr. Harrison and I had engineered, I prepared a dinner slightly more lavish than usual and waited for my husband to come home. Just past 8 p.m., the front door opened, and Mark walked into the living room with a spring in his step. "I'm home, Sarah. Man, I'm exhausted today." Standing in front of me, his suit gave off the faint, sweet scent of floral perfume. That woman, Jessica's perfume. The old me would have noticed that scent and felt my chest tighten, crushed by anxiety. But to the me who knew the whole truth, that cheap perfume was nothing but a foul stench, proving just how shallow and idiotic he was. "Welcome home, honey. You worked so hard." Hiding my contempt perfectly, I greeted him with a manufactured, soft smile and poured a cold beer into his glass. Mark loosened his tie, sat at the table, and began greedily eating the short rib and roasted asparagus I had made. "Yeah, this is pretty good. Must be nice having all day as a housewife to just take your time cooking." Words meant to belittle me now just sounded like white noise. After eating in a good mood for a while, Mark suddenly put on a deliberately sad face, as if he had just remembered something. "Oh, right. Sarah, I'm so sorry, but a massive issue came up with a client for tomorrow, our anniversary. I absolutely can't get out of it. I might even have to stay overnight at the office." I stopped my fork and put on the shocked, devastated expression I had practiced. "What? But we had a reservation at that restaurant downtown. You really can't go?" Seeing my reaction, I didn't miss the twisted glint of joy that flashed in his eyes for a split second. He was basking in a superiority complex, satisfying his need for control by making me sad. "I'm sorry. I want to go too, but I'm the project lead. I can't just bail. I'm working this hard for our family, so please just understand." It was exactly as written on the spreadsheet. Lie about working late and celebrate with Jessica at a luxury hotel. He truly believed his grand plan was executing perfectly according to his script. "I understand. It's work. It can't be helped. Please don't push yourself too hard." When I nodded quietly, Mark looked relieved, and then flashed a thin smirk that mocked me from the bottom of his heart. "Thanks. You're always so understanding. It really helps." Just then, his phone rang on the table. The screen displayed Mom. Mark made a slightly annoyed face but answered it. "Hello, Mom. What's up?" "Yeah, I have to work on our anniversary. It's crazy." "No, Sarah isn't complaining." My mother-in-law's voice, leaking through the receiver, showed she completely bought her son's lie and was fully prepared to attack me. Mark glanced at me and deliberately put the phone on speaker. "It's fine, she understands," he said. "Of course she does. A man is out there fighting for his family. A wife who whines over a silly anniversary is a failure. Sarah, are you listening? If you're Mark's wife, you need to respect your husband more and focus on saving money. I will absolutely not tolerate any wasteful spending." It was almost impossible to believe these words were coming from a woman who was $50,000 in debt and trying to force it onto her son. It took everything in me not to burst out laughing at the sheer comical narcissism of it all. "Yes, Barbara. I will keep that in mind," I replied meekly. My mother-in-law snorted with satisfaction and hung up. After the call, Mark finished his beer and casually brought up the real reason he was so giddy, pretending it was just small talk. "By the way, Sarah, did you look at those family health insurance forms I gave you?" I need to submit them to HR next week, so could you sign and notarize them? That devilish document meant to make me the co-signer for a $300,000 loan. Mark had zero doubt I would blindly sign it. I put on a troubled face. I'm so sorry. I can't find where I put my notary stamp. While you're at work tomorrow, I'll tear the closet apart and find it. I promise I'll give it to you next week. The moment he heard that, blatant panic and irritation flashed across his face. I could see him desperately trying to suppress an annoyed huff, because his plan was slightly delayed. Right. Well, I guess it can't be helped. You absolutely have to have it by next week. Otherwise, we won't get the benefits. Yes, I know. I nodded with a massive smile. This man was trying to use his own wife as a sacrificial lamb for a $300,000 debt so he could start a new life with his mistress. Chewing on that cold reality, I stared right into his face. The only reason I was being this obedient was for one purpose: to ensure he walked out that door tomorrow morning in the absolute best mood, without a single suspicion. The moment he left, the apartment would transform from my sanctuary into an execution block designed to socially annihilate him. And then, dawn broke. This morning, Mark packed a large duffel bag and spent an unusually long time styling his hair in the bathroom. It had been a long time since I had seen him look this excited on a weekend morning when he usually slept until noon. All right, I'm off. I'll be back tomorrow morning. Putting his shoes on in the foyer, he turned to me with a bright, refreshing smile. In his mind, he was going to spend a sweet night with Jessica today, have me sign the loan papers next week, and kick his annoying wife to the curb a few months later. A rosy, perfect future was practically guaranteed in his head. Have a good day at work. Be safe, I said, giving him a dutiful smile and a wave to see him off. The heavy front door slammed shut. I stood perfectly still, listening intently as his footsteps faded down the hall. The moment I heard the elevator doors slide shut and take him down to the lobby, the mask of the good wife I had worn for a year shattered and fell away. I slowly raised my head and stared at the empty entryway with freezing eyes. There was no longer any need to fake a smile. No one could make a fool of me, and no one could give me orders. I was taking my life back with my own two hands. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the living room. The clock had just passed 8 a.m. I had approximately 24 hours until Mark returned tomorrow morning. In that time, I had to erase every trace of myself from this apartment and complete the trap that would send him plummeting to the depths of hell the second he walked through the door. I rolled up my sleeves and opened the flattened cardboard boxes I had hidden in the corner of the living room. It was time for the counterattack to begin. At 8 a.m., the front door closed and the lock clicked. Mark's footsteps faded, and the dull hum of the elevator echoed. I stood frozen at the door, listening until his presence was entirely gone. The moment it was, the invisible thread of tension that had kept me playing the wife for a year snapped. Today, on our first anniversary, was the day I completely erased the existence of Sarah from this house. Standing alone in the quiet living room, I took a massive breath and began assembling the boxes. First, I went to the master bedroom and opened the closet. My important clothes, designer bags, and work documents had already been mailed to my family home piece by piece. All that was left were a few days' worth of casual clothes. I tossed them carelessly into my suitcase, leaving the right half of the closet looking like a gaping hole. Only Mark's suits and shirts hung there, looking pathetic in the morning light. It felt like a premonition of the lonely, miserable future awaiting their owner. Next, the master bathroom. From the glass toothbrush holder we used together, I pulled out my red toothbrush and threw it in the trash. My skincare products and hair ties hidden behind the mirror all went into a black garbage bag. Only his blue toothbrush and men's cologne were left sitting there, completely isolated. Back in the living room, I took down our framed wedding photo from the wall. Me, smiling in a pure white dress, and Mark pulling me close with a gentle look. At the time, I truly believed he would protect me forever and build a warm family with me. But now, this photo was nothing more than evidence of a scam. I opened the back of the frame, pulled the photo out, and without a second of hesitation, ripped it straight down the middle. Reap! The dry, sharp sound echoed in the quiet room. In the torn photo, Mark's fake smile looked sickeningly distorted. By the afternoon, I started deep cleaning the entire apartment. I waxed the hardwood floors, polished the windows, and scrubbed the grease off the kitchen exhaust fan. It was deeply ironic since this building was owned by my company, Miller Property Management. It was essentially the landlord doing the move-out cleaning herself. While cleaning, I found a cheap pair of matching watches Mark had bought us a year ago shoved in the back of a drawer. Someday, I'll buy you a much better watch. Just put up with this one until then. I remembered his shy smile from that day, and for a split second, a tiny prick of pain hit my chest. But the pain dissolved instantly into ice, because I knew from the PI's report that the man who said that was currently buying his mistress $1,000 designer necklaces and watches. I threw the watches straight into the trash. Not a single millimeter of attachment to those past memories remained in me. As evening approached and the sky outside grew dark, I stood in the kitchen and pulled the expensive prime ribeye and short rib ingredients from the fridge. Why go through the trouble of cooking a massive meal when I was about to leave forever? Because it was a cruel stage prop. It was designed to make Mark hallucinate, the second he walked in, that his devoted wife had prepared an anniversary dinner and waited for him. The expensive steak sizzled loudly in the pan. On the adjacent burner, a rich red wine short rib ragu bubbled away. The mouth-watering aroma filling the room was the exact picture of the warm household we had once dreamed of. I remembered how Mark used to eat my food with a huge smile when we were newlyweds. But behind that smile, he was laughing, saying my food was bland and Jessica's was better. With a blank expression, I turned off the stove and plated the food beautifully on our best china. By 8 p.m., a lavish first anniversary dinner sat on the dining table. A picture-perfect scene of a flawless wife waiting bravely for her husband. But there was no one sitting in those chairs. Standing in the corner of the kitchen, I opened my phone and checked Mark's Finsta. Refreshing the screen, I saw the photo and caption posted just minutes ago. The clinking champagne glasses at the luxury hotel. And the caption that extinguished any final shred of empathy I had. Lied about having to work on our anniversary. Drinking champagne with Jessica beats my wife's home cooking any day. Bet she's at home crying right now. LOL. The moment I saw that, I didn't get angry. I was so utterly astounded that I laughed out loud. My dry laughter echoed in the empty living room. He genuinely believed I was sitting in this cold apartment, crying my eyes out waiting for him. He was basking in superiority, imagining a pathetic wife who loved him too much. The clock passed midnight. The room fell silent, and the food on the table was completely cold, white fat coagulating on the surface. I placed my suitcase by the front door and began my final midnight task. Right in the center of the dining table, between the freezing plates of food, I laid out the documents beautifully. First, the divorce papers, fully signed and dated by me. Next, a copy of the $300,000 cosigner loan agreement he tried to make me sign. I took a red Sharpie and wrote void in massive letters across it. Then, the undeniable, graphic photos the PI had taken of Mark and Jessica going into the hotel. And finally, the one thing that would instantly shatter the flimsy ego he had built his entire life upon. The notice of lease termination and eviction order from Miller Property Management. In the section for the owner's name, it clearly read, Sarah Miller, CEO. Next to it, I placed a printed screenshot of the corporate bank account for Miller Property Management. With this, he would realize that his plot to push $300,000 of debt onto me and his plan to steal this apartment had been dancing in the palm of my hand the entire time. Lastly, I placed an envelope addressed to Barbara. Inside was a copy of her $50,000 debt history and a cease and desist letter from Mr. Harrison, stating that due to the divorce, we would refuse all financial assistance to her. As the finishing touch, I took a photo of this brutal reality laid out on the table. I opened the group chat containing Mark's entire extended family and hovered my finger over the send button. It was nearing 2 a.m. My preparations were almost complete. But right as I was about to leave, my hand on the front doorknob, my phone began to vibrate violently with an unexpected call. Staring at the name glowing in the dark hallway, I held my breath. Where is Mark? Did you sign the loan papers yet? Echoing from my phone in the pitch-black entryway at 2 a.m. was the panicked, shrieking voice of my mother-in-law. I stared at the screen slowly. She knew. She knew about his entire plan. The very last drop of sympathy I had evaporated, replaced by an icy, chilling joy spreading through me. I played dumb for just a moment longer. But in just a few minutes, I would send her plunging into the abyss. When I saw Barbara on the screen, I initially thought Mark's affair had been exposed and caused a scene. But the moment I answered, the only thing piercing my eardrum was the ugly screeching of an old woman who cared only about saving her own skin. Hello? Barbara, what's going on at this hour? I answered in a calm, sleepy voice. She didn't even try to hide her irritation as she snapped, Don't what's going on me? I've called Mark a dozen times and it keeps going straight to voicemail. He promised he'd have the $50,000 ready by tomorrow morning. What is he playing at? Hearing that, the final puzzle pieces clicked into place. The deadline for Barbara's massive debt was tomorrow. If the debt she secretly built up behind her husband's back was exposed, her strict, image-obsessed husband would undoubtedly throw her out on the street. $50,000? Barbara, what are you talking about? Mark is at the office. He had a massive crisis and had to stay overnight. When I played dumb, she clicked her tongue, her true, arrogant colors completely exposed. Are you really this clueless? Just call Mark right now. He told me a slow, stupid woman like you would easily sign the papers for a $300,000 loan if he just lied and said it was for family insurance. Her ugly voice echoed in the dark hallway. I closed my eyes quietly. My mother-in-law didn't just know about Mark's plan to make me a sacrificial lamb for a loan. She actively participated in his fraud just to clear her own debt, eagerly waiting for me to be scammed. You're just a housewife living off Mark's salary every single day. When the time comes, it's obvious you should be the sacrifice for the family. Hurry up, get that paper signed, and get the money ready. The bottomless depravity of a human being trying to push her own shopping debt onto her clueless daughter-in-law and trying to justify it with the beautiful word family. I felt so incredibly foolish for ever calling this woman mom, cooking for her, and desperately trying to win her approval. Barbara. The tone of my voice dropped an octave. The obedient daughter-in-law was entirely gone. What do you mean? Call Mark? Mark isn't at the office. He's currently drinking champagne in a luxury hotel suite with a woman from his office named Jessica. That's why his phone is off. What? A mistress? A hotel? Have you lost your mind? I could hear her gasping for air over the phone. I smiled a cold smile and spoke slowly and clearly. I am absolutely not signing that loan document. I have already consulted my lawyers. Your husband is going to find out about your $50,000 debt tomorrow. Please take responsibility for your own actions. Goodbye. Wait a minute. Sarah, do you have any idea what you're saying? I hit the end call button and immediately blocked her number. Slipping the phone into my purse, I felt the invisible curse of their family completely vanish. No one could chain me down anymore. I was free. I let go of the suitcase at the door and walked back into the living room one last time. I had one thing left to do. I had to strip this apartment of all its warmth and signs of life, turning it into a literal empty shell. First, I grabbed the thermostat and turned off the HVAC. The hum of the warm air stopped instantly. The freezing night air began to slowly steal the warmth from the room. Next, I pulled the plugs on all the ambient lamps. The warm, orange glow of the lamp we bought on our honeymoon vanished, leaving the room feeling harsh and exposed. I unplugged the refrigerator, the air purifiers killing the power to everything one by one. Finally, I stood in front of the large wall clock. The rhythmic tick-tock was the symbol of the time we had spent together as a family in this room. I reached up, took it off the wall, and pulled the batteries out. The moment I did, all sound vanished from the apartment. A silence so absolute it made my ears ring. The warm atmosphere of a home where a wife cooked dinner and waited for someone to return was nowhere to be found. All that remained was a freezing space, surrounded by sterile drywall. A true, empty shell devoid of a soul. Tomorrow morning, Mark will open this door. He'll say I'm home, in a triumphant voice, fully believing his red-eyed, crying wife will greet him in a warm apartment. He'll walk in convinced his lies worked perfectly and that I am now his debt slave. But what will greet him is freezing air and an overwhelming, dead silence. I remembered something my father used to say. Sarah, truly strong people don't yell, forget themselves in anger, or scream at their opponents. They quietly present the facts and walk away so far the person can never reach them again. That is the ultimate revenge. Right now, I understood the meaning of my father's words painfully well. Screaming, crying, hitting your husband's chest and demanding, "How could you cheat on me?" That only proves you still have expectations and love for them. I had absolutely zero love, expectation, or even anger left for Mark. He had simply become a pebble on the side of the road, completely irrelevant to my life. Standing in front of the dining table, I looked down at the documents glowing white in the dark. The divorce papers, the void loan agreement, the graphic photos, the eviction notice. These alone were enough destructive power for him to realize his life was completely over. But I intended to deal one final, fatal blow. No matter how much evidence or legal paperwork I shoved in his face, those were just legal facts. What he feared most was being genuinely despised and thrown away like trash by the very woman he looked down upon and thought he completely controlled. I took a fountain pen and a pristine sheet of stationery from my bag. Placing the paper on the edge of the table, I let the pen glide in the silent room. The scratchy sound of the nib echoed in the dark. I already knew exactly what I was going to write. No words of resentment, no expressions of sorrow, and certainly no anger-filled curses. Just a few short sentences designed to snap his flimsy pride in half and make him taste a misery he could never recover from. When I finished writing, I placed the letter right in the center of the table, the most visible spot. This would be the very last thing Mark read amidst the scene left for him. It was the death sentence for his life as he knew it. Without a shred of hesitation, I walked to the door and grabbed my suitcase. When he reads this, I wonder what kind of scream he'll let out. Right in the middle of the table, between the cold steak and the ragu, sat the crisp white letter. I wrote only the cold, hard facts, devoid of any emotion. Mark, happy first anniversary. I'm sure the champagne you drank with Jessica in the luxury suite overlooking the city was delicious. Please review the documents on the table. I know everything about the $300,000 loan you tried to saddle me with, and your mother's $50,000 debt. I thoroughly enjoyed reading the timeline to divorce spreadsheet in your shared Google Drive. The divorce papers are already signed and dated by me. All evidence of your infidelity has been handed over to my lawyers. You and Jessica will be formally served with a lawsuit for damages shortly. Also, regarding this apartment you so proudly leased, this building is owned by Miller Property Management, my late father's company. I am the CEO of that company. By my authority as the owner, your lease has been terminated. As of today, you are trespassing, so pack your bags and vacate the premises immediately. P.S. I enjoyed reading your secret Instagram account every day. I wonder, which one of us is crying right now? Do not ever show your face to me again. Goodbye. I folded the letter in half, wrote to Mark on the front, and placed it gently on top of the divorce papers. My work here was entirely finished. I stood up slowly, pulled my suitcase, and headed out the front door. I looked back at the silent apartment one last time. The power was off, the clock was stopped. There wasn't a single fragment of the illusion of a family left in this space. I quietly opened the door and stepped out. The freezing pre-dawn wind gently brushed my warm cheeks. Slam. The heavy metal door shut. I put my key in the lock, turned it with a loud click, and secured the deadbolt. Then, I dropped the key into the mail slot next to the door. The small clatter of metal hitting metal signaled that the first act of my 30-year life as Sarah Miller was officially over. Getting into the Uber waiting out front, the driver quietly pulled away. Looking out the window, the eastern sky was shifting from a dark, bruising purple to a vibrant orange. The city of Chicago was about to welcome a new day. For the past year, I had lived in a corner of this city holding my breath, tiptoeing around my husband's moods and enduring my mother-in-law's insults, believing that if I just held on, we would build a warm family. But the thing I truly needed to protect wasn't a family built on lies. It was my own dignity. Squinting at the rising morning sun, I smiled a genuine, natural smile for the first time in months. The heavy, lead-like knot deep in my chest was gone, and I felt crisp, clean air fill every corner of my lungs. My new life begins right now. In the luxury suite of a downtown hotel, Mark woke up slowly to the bright morning sun filtering through the thick blackout curtains. On the plush, white bed next to him, Jessica, fresh out of the shower and wearing a bathrobe, was sipping room service coffee. Morning. Last night was amazing, Jessica said, pushing her long hair back with a seductive smile. Mark stretched grandly and sat up. Yeah, morning. Man, I'm always the most relaxed when I'm with you. Going back to that suffocating apartment is so depressing. Jessica giggled. Just hold out a little longer. You're having your wife sign the loan papers today, right? Oh, I've got it handled. When I told her last night I had to work, she got all meek and said, "Don't work too hard." She is so easy to manipulate. If I just go home with some cheap grocery store cake, she'll probably cry tears of joy and sign whatever I want. Drunk on his own flawless scenario, Mark got out of bed. Once the $300,000 clears, I'll pay off Mom's debt and use the rest as a down payment for a new condo for me and Jess. I'll dump Mom's medical care on Sarah, make up an excuse, and kick her out. You really are a genius, Mark. Your wife probably doesn't suspect in her wildest dreams that she's about to be loaded with debt and thrown out on the street. It's hilarious. The two of them looked at each other and let out shallow, vulgar laughs, entirely convinced they were the smartest people in the room. They had no idea that the pathetic wife they were mocking had already executed a flawless, inescapable trap utilizing power far beyond their comprehension. At 10 a.m., after parting ways with Jessica in the lobby, Mark stopped at a convenience store near the station. In his hand was a plastic bag holding a cheap cake, exactly as he said, to butter up his wife. "I'm home, Sarah. Sorry about yesterday. I know it was our anniversary." Mark practiced his perfect excuse in his head over and over. He got in the elevator of his building and pressed the button for his floor. Humming a tune as he walked down the hall, his steps were light. His head was filled only with the $300,000 he was about to get, and his glamorous new life with Jessica. His wife was probably waiting for him right now, cooking a warm breakfast. When she saw his face, she'd cling to him, saying how lonely she was. Basking in that superiority, Mark stood in front of his door. He pulled out his key, unlocked the door, and pushed the heavy metal open. "I'm home, Sarah." "Sorry I'm late," Mark called out in a sweet, gentle voice, flashing a confident smile as he stepped inside. But the moment he did, what wrapped around him wasn't his wife's warm greeting or the smell of fresh coffee. It was pitch black, freezing cold, and stripped of every single sound of life. An eerie, tomb-like silence. As he took off his shoes and stepped into the living room, his eyes landed on a bizarre, unnatural scene set up on the dining table. "Sarah? Hey, where are you?" Standing in the dim entryway, Mark called out into the apartment with a puzzled face. Normally, the moment he unlocked the door, Sarah would come jogging to the foyer to greet him. But today, there was no answer. In fact, there wasn't a single trace of a person living in the apartment at all. With the plastic bag of cake dangling from his hand, Mark opened the living room door. Instantly, a biting, freezing air wrapped around him. The heat was off. The air purifier was silent. He couldn't even hear the hum of the refrigerator. The absolute silence was so perfect that for a second, Mark thought he had walked into the wrong apartment. What the hell is this? He hit the wall switch to turn on the lights. As the room lit up, Mark gasped at the abnormal sight. The usually spotless apartment looked deeply unnatural. The bathroom door was wide open, and in the glass toothbrush holder they shared, only his blue toothbrush sat completely alone. The wedding photo that always hung on the wall was ripped violently in half and thrown on the floor. "Hey, Sarah, where are you?" Feeling a sudden spike of irritation and unease, Mark yanked the bedroom door open. The closet was wide open. Sarah's clothes, bags, shoes, every single thing belonging to her had vanished. The gaping void of the empty closet thrust a terrifying sense of emptiness at him. What? Unable to process what was happening, Mark stumbled back into the living room. That was when his eyes locked onto the dining table. It wasn't the crying, waiting wife he had imagined. It was a bizarre, almost psychopathic, perfectly arranged stage set. In the center of the table, an expensive prime ribeye and short rib ragu were beautifully plated. It was clearly a first anniversary dinner, but the food was stone cold, the fat on the steak congealed white, and a gross film covered the stew. And arranged like a fan between the freezing plates was a stack of papers and photos. What is this? Unconsciously dropping the bag of cake on the floor, Mark was drawn toward the table as if magnetized. The first thing his eyes caught was a very familiar copy of a document. The $300,000 co-signer agreement he tried to make Sarah sign. Right across the center, the word void was scrawled in massive red marker. Why is this here? His heart started hammering violently against his ribs. With trembling hands, Mark picked up the next piece of paper. It was a stack of crystal-clear photographs taken by a private investigator. Pictures of him and Jessica pressed against each other in an alleyway. Pictures of their backs as they disappeared into the hotel entrance. No way. The shock hit him like a bucket of ice water, and he stumbled backward. The cover-up he believed was flawless had been completely exposed to Sarah the entire time. Further down the table sat a copy of a corporate bank statement and a ruthless notice of eviction from Miller Property Management. The moment he read the owner's name, Sarah Miller, CEO Mark felt the floor literally drop out from under him. The woman he had acted so high and mighty toward, the woman he looked down on as a clueless housewife, was actually the owner of this luxury building and the CEO of a massive company. Only now did he realize what an astronomically foolish, pathetic clown he had been playing. And then, sitting on top of the pile, was a crisp white letter, resting quietly but with overwhelming dominance on top of a signed divorce petition. Mark picked up the letter, his face pale and drained of all blood. His fingertips shook violently. "Mark, happy first anniversary. I'm sure the champagne you drank with Jessica in the luxury suite overlooking the city was delicious. Reading the first line, Mark forgot how to breathe, choking on the air. It was a flawless counterattack to the caption he posted on his Finsta last night. Please review the documents on the table. I know everything about the $300,000 loan you tried to saddle me with, and your mother's $50,000 debt. I thoroughly enjoyed reading the timeline to divorce spreadsheet in your shared Google Drive. The light completely vanished from Mark's eyes. Sarah didn't just know about the affair, she knew every detail of their repulsive debt, shifting plot. He realized the Excel file he had made while laughing with Jessica was now the very evidence sealing his own destruction. The divorce papers are already signed and dated by me. All evidence of your infidelity has been handed over to my lawyers. You and Jessica will be formally served with a lawsuit for damages shortly. A lawsuit. Not only was he not getting the $300,000 loan, but he and Jessica were about to be slammed with a massive financial penalty. A catastrophic equation of his ruined future ran through his mind. Also, regarding this apartment you so proudly leased, this building is owned by Miller Property Management, my late father's company. I am the CEO of that company. By my authority as the owner, your lease has been terminated. As of today, you are trespassing, so pack your bags and vacate the premises immediately. Mark was brutally informed that the very floor he was standing on was no longer a place he was allowed to be. P.S. I enjoyed reading your secret Instagram account every day. I wonder, which one of us is crying right now? Do not ever show your face to me again. Goodbye. The moment he finished the final sentence, the letters slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. He gripped the edge of the table, desperately trying to stay standing, but the strength completely left his knees, and he collapsed onto the hardwood. Only faint, wordless groans escaped his mouth. He thought he had won completely. He thought he could turn his annoying wife into a debt slave and live his best life with his mistress. But the reality? His wife had seen through everything, looked down on him, and thrown him away like garbage. His loan, his money, his place to live all stripped away. All that was left was cold food and his own pathetic, ruined self. Sarah. This is a joke, right, Sarah? The miserable, pathetic scream of a man echoed hollowly through the silent apartment, reaching absolutely no one. Slumped on the hardwood floor, it took Mark several minutes to even begin to comprehend the situation he was in. In front of him was a freezing, lavish anniversary dinner, and a mountain of legal documents serving as his death sentence. This is a lie. This has to be some kind of prank. A trembling voice leaked from his dry mouth. Just dozens of minutes ago, he hadn't doubted for a second that he was the winner in life. He had spent a sweet night in a luxury hotel with his mistress, and was about to dump his debt on his nuisance of a wife. Never in his wildest dreams did he imagine his wife would see through it all, strip him of everything, and throw him out on the street. Mark frantically grabbed his smartphone off the floor. With shaking fingers, he found Sarah's number and hit call. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. The robotic, sterile voice echoed endlessly in the cold room. It wasn't just a block. Sarah had canceled the phone line entirely, completely severing any way for him to contact her. He opened his texts, but her contact info was gone. He couldn't send an iMessage, couldn't reach her on social media. Sarah, please, just listen to me. Mark begged the screen of his phone, crying out to no one. The wife he had mocked just yesterday for being a useless housewife was now the only lifeline he desperately needed to cling to. Just then, the phone in his hand vibrated violently. The screen read, "Mom." Mark hit the answer button as if possessed. He clung to a faint hope that maybe Sarah had gone to his parents' house to pay her respects. Hello? Mom? Did Sarah call you? Before Mark could even finish, his eardrum was nearly shattered by the hysterical screeching of his mother, Barbara. Mark! What the hell is going on? Sarah knows everything about my debt. And your affair. Wait, Mom, you talked to Sarah? Last night, in the middle of the night, that bitch told me to pay off my own debt and hung up on me. Why didn't you keep her fooled? My $50,000 is due today. If your father finds out, he's going to throw me out of the house. What spilled from his mother's mouth were not words of concern for her son's collapsing marriage, but pure, unadulterated rage over her own safety and the money she was losing. Mark felt a splitting headache coming on. Mom, I'm the one who is screwed. Sarah is the owner of this whole building. I'm getting evicted right now, and she's suing me for everything I have. Mark pleaded through tears, but his screams didn't reach Barbara at all. I don't care about that. This is all happening because you had to go and have an affair and ruin the plan. Take responsibility and go to a payday loan place right now and get me my $50,000. Are you kidding me? My life is over and you only care about yourself? Don't you dare talk to your mother like that. I don't need a useless son like you. Beep. The call was unilaterally cut off. Mark stared blankly at his phone. His mother, who had always spoiled him because he was the eldest son and relied on him whenever it was convenient, instantly abandoned him the moment she realized she couldn't extract money from him. There was never any family bond. It was a shallow relationship held together only by vanity and cash. Damn it! What the hell is this? What is happening? Mark screamed, tearing at his hair. No, it's not over. I still have Jessica. Jessica is smart. She knows the law. If I talk to her, she'll definitely come up with a brilliant idea to overturn this nightmare. Even the lawsuit. If we fight it together, we can figure something out. Clinging to her like a drowning man, Mark dialed his mistress's number. After a few rings, she picked up. Hey Mark, what's up? Forget something? Jessica's voice was sweet and relaxed. They had just been together an hour ago. Mark spoke rapidly, desperate for a lifeline. Jess, please help me. It's a disaster. Sarah knew everything. She saw the whole timeline to divorce spreadsheet on the shared drive. What? What are you talking about? Jessica's voice instantly lost its sweetness. It's true. I came home, and she's gone. There are divorce papers and a lawsuit threat on the table. And Jess, this condo is owned by Sarah's company. I'm getting evicted today, and the $300,000 loan is completely dead. A heavy, terrifying silence fell over the line. Jess, what should we do? Hold on. Are you telling me you had no idea your own wife was a real estate CEO? Jessica's voice transformed into something chilling and cold, as if she were talking to a total stranger. I didn't know. Sarah kept it a secret. Are you an idiot? I'm speechless. I wasted my time being strung along by a pathetic loser like you. Whoa, what are you saying? Listen to me. The only reason I said I'd marry you was because you promised you were pulling a $300,000 loan to buy us a new condo. Why the hell would I stay with a broke, homeless loser who is about to get sued for everything he has by his ex-wife? Mark couldn't believe his ears. He was the only one who actually believed they were in love. To Jessica, Mark was nothing more than a convenient ATM to fund her lavish lifestyle. Wait, Jess, we love each other. You're going to have to pay half the damages anyway. If we hire a lawyer together, don't be ridiculous. I'll just say you manipulated me. If you ever contact me again, I'm calling the cops and reporting you for stalking. Lose my number. Beep. 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 The merciless electronic tone signaled that his relationship with Jessica was completely severed. Mark dropped his phone onto the floor. Abandoned by his wife, discarded by his mother, betrayed by his mistress. The man who, just a few hours ago, believed he was the center of the universe, had literally lost everything and was now utterly alone on a cold, hardwood floor. The air in the room was freezing. The silence, lacking even the ticking of a clock, made his isolation feel unbearable. Mark looked at the food on the table, the prime ribeye, covered in white fat. Previously, if dinner was even slightly cold, he would have screamed at Sarah, demanding to know why a housewife couldn't serve a hot meal. With shaking hands, Mark picked up a fork and put a cold, hardened piece of meat into his mouth. As he chewed, the taste of cold grease and a burnt, bitter flavor spread over his tongue. It tasted like chewing on ash. Sarah, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Sarah's gentle smile, waiting for him every day with a warm meal, flooded vividly back into his mind. He finally realized how incredibly blessed he had been, and how he had trampled on that pure, precious love with his own arrogance. Massive tears spilled from his eyes, dropping one by one onto the cold steak. It was too late. It was entirely too late. Just as Mark was about to cover his face with his hands and break down sobbing like a child, the phone on the floor began to vibrate violently for a third time. Mark flinched, his shoulders jumping, and looked at the screen through blurry eyes. The caller ID read, VP of Sales, Work. Today was Saturday. A direct call from the vice president on a weekend morning was completely abnormal. A horrible premonition ran down Mark's spine as a cold sweat broke out. Sarah's revenge was not over. The true social annihilation she had prepared was about to be thrust right at his throat. Yes, this is Mark, he answered in a trembling voice. Through the receiver, the usually calm vice president's voice was low, suppressed with absolute rage. Mark, where are you right now? I'm at home. At home? Don't screw with me. Explain the hotel receipts you expensed to the company while claiming you were on a business trip. Mark's heart gave a sickening, violent lurch. Expense receipts. Yes. HR received an anonymous whistleblower email this morning. It contained every single receipt from the luxury hotel suite you stayed in with Jessica, alongside a detailed breakdown of your fraudulent travel expenses. It also included a complete data log of highly inappropriate emails between the two of you using company servers. Mark felt the blood drain entirely from his body. Sarah hadn't just hired a PI to catch his affair. She had dug into the fact that he was expensing his hotel stays and dinners to the company to build his alibi, and she had secured the absolute, undeniable proof. No, sir, there must be some misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? The attached photos clearly show you two drinking champagne on the company card at a luxury restaurant. Furthermore, this email included allegations with proof that you have been demanding illegal kickbacks from our vendors. It was true. To fund his expensive gifts for Jessica to show off, Mark had been forcing vendors to pay kickbacks and filing fake entertainment expenses, repeatedly violating corporate compliance. Report to HR first thing Monday morning. Jessica will be there too. This is not just a workplace affair. This is embezzlement and corporate fraud. You are looking at immediate termination with cause. Prepare yourself. The phone clicked dead. Mark sat there, his mouth hanging open, staring blankly at the wall. Termination with cause. His 401k and severance stripped. The black mark of being fired for embezzlement meant he would never find a decent job in his industry again. It wasn't just his private life. His entire social standing was obliterated in a matter of seconds. What Sarah had prepared wasn't some mild wife's revenge. It was a meticulous, flawless execution designed to completely erase a human being from society. Mark's breathing grew shallow, sending him into hyperventilation. Ah! He screamed a voiceless scream, crawling across the floor. There was nowhere to run. The lawsuit damages, his mother's debt crisis, and now the corporate restitution claims. Waiting for him was an insurmountable mountain of debt and a hellish life abandoned by everyone. Then, the phone vibrated again. The screen read, Miller Property Management. Mark flinched, but he couldn't afford not to answer. If he ignored it, the police might show up to physically remove him. Hello? Am I speaking with Mark? The male voice on the phone was incredibly bureaucratic, entirely devoid of emotion. That made Mark's terror spike even higher. Yes, that's me. As stated in the notice to vacate, your lease agreement was terminated effective immediately today. Therefore, at 10:00 a.m. tomorrow, our contractors will arrive to reclaim the keys and begin trash removal. Tomorrow? Please wait. You can't expect me to find a new place that fast. Per Section 14 of the lease agreement, unauthorized trespassing post-termination incurs a penalty of $300 per day. Additionally, the disposal of any furniture or belongings left in the unit will be billed directly to you. If you have not vacated the premises by 10:00 a.m. tomorrow, we will execute a forced eviction accompanied by law enforcement. Please be advised. The robotic voice completely ignored Mark's screaming pleas and proceeded with the administrative protocol. Please, let me talk to my wife. CEO Miller. Let me apologize to her directly. CEO Miller has strictly ordered that no direct communication from you is to be forwarded, and that all matters are to be handled legally through her attorneys. Furthermore, we have already sent a certified letter to your guarantor regarding the lease termination and any impending charges. Something inside Mark's brain completely snapped. My guarantor. You contacted my dad? Mark's father was an incredibly strict, old-fashioned man. If his father found out about his son's affair, embezzlement, and the debt problems of both his son and wife, he wouldn't just be disowned. The family would collapse, and Mark would be permanently exiled as the ultimate disgrace of the bloodline. We will see you at 10:00 a.m. tomorrow. Goodbye. The call ended. Mark threw his phone across the room. The screen shattered like a spider web against the wall, but he didn't even have the capacity to care. It was over. It was all over. Mark pulled his knees to his chest, curling up in the corner of the dim living room. The man who, until yesterday, believed he was a chosen, special elite and looked down on his wife, now realized he was the most pathetic, worthless piece of trash on earth. The apartment remained perfectly silent. No matter how much he screamed, cried, or shed tears of regret, there was no one in this space to catch his sorrow. The cold steak and ragu on the table, the stopped clock on the wall, the violently torn wedding photo, they all seemed to be eternally mocking his arrogance and stupidity. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my father's old study at my childhood home, slowly sipping hot tea. Outside the window, the bright early summer sun illuminated the trees in the yard. I could hear the chirping of birds. It was a remarkably peaceful Saturday morning. On the desk sat my phone, displaying a short message from Mr. Harrison. The corporate whistleblower report and the eviction notice from property management have all been executed. Your husband is expected to be terminated with cause on Monday. I have also informed your father-in-law of everything regarding Barbara's situation. Even reading that report, no vulgar, gloating feeling of serves you right bubbled up in my heart. There was only a quiet, profound sense of relief that it was finally, truly over. I looked down at the ring finger of my left hand. There was still a faint white tan line where my wedding ring used to be, but with time, that too would fade away. Not a single drop of hatred or anger toward Mark remained in me. A person like him simply wasn't worth consuming any more of my precious emotions. From now on, I would protect the company my father left me and walk my own path on my own 2 feet. I stood up slowly and took a deep stretch. The breeze blowing through the window felt incredibly refreshing. Seasons cycled, and half a year passed since that freezing winter morning. From the porch of my childhood home, the trees in the yard were covered in vibrant green, and the pleasant summer breeze rustled the leaves. I sat in front of the framed photo of my late father on the mantel, quietly looking at it. Dad, it's finally all over. I'm sorry for making you worry, but I'm going to be okay now. I spoke to him silently in my heart. The aftermath concluded exactly as Mr. Harrison had scripted, or rather, it met an even more brutal end for them. Mark was fired with cause first thing Monday morning, because all the evidence of his embezzlement, his inappropriate workplace affair, and his vendor kickbacks was perfectly documented. He had absolutely no way to talk himself out of it. His $401k in severance were seized, and the company hit him with a massive lawsuit for damages. Coupled with the settlement he owed me, Mark's debt instantly snowballed to an astronomical figure. His last hope, his mistress Jessica, cut off all contact with him entirely. She, too, was fired from the company. According to the PI's follow-up report, Mark is now working grueling day labor construction jobs, living paycheck to paycheck in a tiny, run-down, windowless studio apartment. The comfortable luxury condo life he used to brag about while mocking stay-at-home wives will never return to him. The rock-bottom life he loved to look down upon is now the life he lives. My ex-mother-in-law, Barbara, met a similarly disastrous fate. Her husband was absolutely furious when he discovered she had secretly racked up massive debt and that their eldest son had been fired for embezzlement due to an affair. For a man who valued his public image above all else, it was an unforgivable disgrace to the family name. He immediately handed her divorce papers. With no alimony and no share of the assets, she was thrown out on the street without a penny. I heard she sold off all the designer bags and jewelry she had bought for status, and now works quietly as a night shift janitor at a strip mall to slowly pay off her loans. The woman who haughtily lectured me that a daughter-in-law should work like a maid is ironically spending her final years scrubbing other people's floors. Hearing about their fates brought me no joy or superiority, only a deep sense of relief that I had safely escaped the bottomless swamp of their greed and taken my life back. The day the judge finalized the divorce decree, and I officially reclaimed my maiden name at the county clerk's office, my heart felt so light. I will never forget that feeling for the rest of my life. I gently brushed my left ring finger. The white tan line from the ring I wore for a year had completely vanished, returning to its natural color. It was almost as if that one year I lived as Sarah, the submissive wife, was just an illusion. Today, I am Sarah Miller again. As the CEO of Miller Property Management, the company my father left me, I am living busy but incredibly fulfilling days. Though I am a CEO in name, I still have much to learn. But the veteran employees who supported my father have been guiding me warmly, and sometimes strictly. The other day, Mr. Harrison visited our office. Sarah, your expression has completely changed. You're starting to carry that same dignified air your father had when he ran this place, he said, his eyes crinkling behind his glasses as I served him coffee. It's all thanks to you, Mr. Harrison. If you hadn't pushed me forward back then, I'd probably still be crying myself to sleep. Acting as their convenient scapegoat, I said, bowing my head deeply. He smiled gently and shook his head. No, the one who made the decision to stand up and fight was you, Sarah. When a person realizes what they truly need to protect, they discover a strength far greater than they ever imagined. Through the real estate business, I've had the chance to meet many different families. Just recently, an elderly couple came in looking for a small, single-story house to spend their retirement in. We don't need a big house anymore. As long as there's enough room for my wife and me to drink coffee on the porch together, we'll be more than happy, the husband said, smiling at his wife. Seeing them, my chest grew warm. There was no vanity or calculation between them. There was only deep respect and affection forged by walking through a long life together. My father used to say, "Sarah, a house isn't just a box. It's a mirror that reflects the lives of the people living inside it. No matter how grand the mansion, if there's no love, it's just a cold block of stone." I didn't fully understand it back then, but now I understand it painfully well. That luxury condo I used to live in was nothing more than a cold block of drywall without a shred of love. But this old childhood home my father left me has warm family memories etched into every single scratch on the doorframes. What is a family? What is a marriage? Whether you share blood or are tied together by a piece of paper called a marriage license, if there is no mutual respect and compassion, it's just an empty box. Mark and Barbara tried desperately to decorate that empty box with vanity and appearances, turning a blind eye to the fact that the inside was rotting away. I stepped out of that rotting box on my own 2 feet, and I can finally feel the real warmth of the sun again. When I was a housewife, Mark used to sneer, "You don't know how hard it is out in the real world." And yes, stepping out into the business world has its challenges. But when a client smiles and says, "I'm so glad we trusted your company, Sarah," the joy is irreplaceable. I am still working hard for others, but now I am surrounded by people who properly evaluate my efforts and show genuine gratitude. I stood up and walked out onto the porch. In the corner of the yard, the hydrangea bushes were beginning to bloom. They will drink in the summer rain and bloom even more beautifully. I am the same. The pain and tears of the past year were not a waste. I now clearly understand that it was a necessary trial. A trial to learn the dark side of humanity, to face my own weaknesses, and to gain the quiet strength to stand back up. "Sarah, your 10 o'clock meeting is here," the voice of our longtime office manager called out from the hallway. "I'll be right there," I answered brightly, turning my back to the view of the yard. I no longer need a fake smile to please anyone. I cry when I'm sad, and I laugh from the bottom of my heart when I'm happy. I am carving out that totally normal, fundamentally human life with my own 2 hands. Catching my reflection in the hallway mirror, I smiled. The weak, frightened woman was nowhere to be found. A fiercely independent woman, standing tall and looking straight ahead, stared back at me with unshakable resolve. When I opened the front doors of the office, the brilliant summer light wrapped around me. The sky above was endlessly, perfectly blue. Today, a new day begins. And the path I am walking stretches out bright and limitless before me.